everybody who's normally here. Welcome to those of you who are not normally here. We are really, really excited about today. And it all started when Ilhaam and I were chatting at the Recruiters Unite conference, where I know a few of you were at as well. And at that conference, we were having such a passionate conversation around how important it is to be able to be in a space where you can, if you're a recruiter, partner with a corporate in a way that maximizes their brand and is partnering in being able to represent their brand and create that positive, attractive candidate experience, as well as service your clients in a way that impresses them. And I think these days it's no longer just the external recruiters, it's also the internal talent acquisition team who need to be able to treat their internal clients as somebody would treat an external client. So that's also important. So as we were talking, I said to Ilhaam, I do this virtual masterclass. Please, can I talk to you there? I think that people will really enjoy this topic. And she said, absolutely. And then she said, please, can I just do it earlier on in the year than later because of their processes? So we arranged it for today. So thank you so, so much, Ilhaam. I am so excited to have you here.
No, thanks. Thanks so much, Jane. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this on such short notice. I will say that the reason why I think it was such a good conversation to have as we start or embark on the process to reissue our PSL, because I know post a session like this, you're always going to have people asking, so how do I get onto the PSL? And had this been, a couple of months from now, I would have probably said, unfortunately, it's already closed for the next 3 years, which would pretty much have defeated the purpose. And so I thought it best to do so whilst there's still an opportunity for that to happen. So thank you, Jane.
No, absolutely. And I think that was really considerate of you, Ilhaam. It would have been really disappointing for people to get all of this information and then can't go any further for now.
I know.
So Ilhaam, as you will know, if you are joining today, is the Group Head of Talent Acquisition for Absa Bank. So you will know that bank very well if you're in South Africa, and you will know that bank by association if you're other places in the world. But I really want to ask Ilhaam if she'll be able to tell us more of her story in terms of how you got into this role, Ilhaam, and what fascinates you and interests you in it. And please do, connect with us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. We'd really like to know you better and know your experience better. So Ilhaam, let's jump in and please do share your story. And then, as I say, I'll ask some more questions. We'll have some conversation and then open it up to everybody else to ask your questions.
Awesome. Love that. And I love the fact that it's conversational, because there's nothing worse than preaching or giving or being the one-sided conversation, let's put it that way. So I've just recently taken on the group role at Absa, so please be gentle, guys. And I see another familiar face, Malika, coming up while I'm saying this, so it's really nice to see familiar faces as well. So I recently took on the group role. I've been with Absa for just under a year. It will be a year anniversary at the end of March. I joined Absa on the 1st of April last year in the corporate functions as head of talent acquisition for corporate functions, which was really a bouquet of about 9 different business units that include tech, risk, finance, etc. And prior to that, I was, some of you may know, I was with Old Mutual for 4 years. And then I think years kind of prior to that is really what I want to touch on, because I come from a consulting and agency environment, and I morphed and made the transition into corporates in 2019, like a year before COVID hit. And so, it's something that I'm very passionate about when it comes to the relationship between agency and corporate, and what works and what doesn't work, is because I've been on the other side of the fence as well. So, whatever nuggets I'm able to share, I'm more than happy to do so. I am also quite transparent, so let me just put a massive disclaimer out as well, because, often when we have conversation with agencies or in these partnerships, as we know, many corporates, it's no surprise that many corporates are building internal capability. But I do have the fundamental belief that there's always going to be opportunity and a necessity to partner with agencies and with key strategic partners. I don't think there's any point in time where it's not going to be a requirement, you know, because we're changing, organizations are changing so often, and people are leaving and exiting and joining, and, you know, the needs of the organizations are shifting. You need to be able to complement your internal capability with external partners. And I think that's where the rubber really hits the road, is that you don't want to then start engaging with agencies and finding out, kind of going through that interview process and saying, well, who's going to work for me or who's not. But you want those key partners to already be on your PSL. You want to have already built a relationship. And sometimes that means engaging over a 6-month period, sometimes a 12-month period, without necessarily gaining anything from that relationship. But I have found eventually, you know, you do, because you've built a relationship, you understand each other, you understand the needs, you understand what works or doesn't work. So I think for me, that's important. I think getting to understand your not only your stakeholders, but your organization is critically important. I know it sounds very cliche, but I think that's important. I will also be a little bit controversial in saying that in wearing the other side of the hat, I often get feedback from agencies as well, but Ilhaam, we do try to get to know the organization, and I'm being blocked. No recruiter or internal recruiter wants to speak to me, wants to give me that information. And again, I go back to the disclaimer around, you know, we're building internal capability. So you may find recruiters not necessarily at that point in time wanting to build relationships, although I do personally think that it's key. I think that, you know, the way you show up in your communication, whether it's be via email or at a networking event, I think that's important. I think being personable is important. People connect with people. I must tell you, there's nothing that I despise more than somebody selling me something. You know, when you come with a sales pitch, I lose all interest, because there's just no authenticity in the communication. And I think it probably works both ways. I think if I'm going to show up as my authentic self and be open and transparent and be clear about, you know, how we can work together well together, I think that I would expect the same in return. But yeah, I think maybe just another snippet in making the transition from an agency to a corporate environment as well, very vastly different, because your focus areas are really very different. But what I can say again, in being on the other side of the fence and understanding that the market is actually very competitive, Jane. It's highly competitive. Who stands out and what stands out? And, you know, it's really that individual that's going to take the time to communicate to me as the person, not me as the group head of talent acquisition.
Yes.
And I mean, we all work with people. That's what we do. It's our bread and butter. We've done it for many, many years. I'm not going to tell you how many years. But we get to understand and read tones of emails and calls, and so you pick it up a lot easier than somebody else that's not in a people-orientated environment. So I think that's probably, if anything, out of this entire call, the biggest takeaway I would like that everyone to leave is with just show up being authentic and sincere in your approach. Yes, we are all here to make money. That's the business. You are here to make money, and that's your business. But I think when you operate from a value first approach rather than I want to make money first approach, it shows in your communication and the way you come across. I'm going to pause there.
I know, I love what you're saying, Ilhaam, and I think it's so valuable, and I'm with you heart and soul about that. And I think when we were talking at the conference, I think that passion was coming through in our conversation. And I love what you say about taking the time to build relationships, because sometimes people have a different expectation or narrative around what it takes to build a relationship. And there might be some impatience, or there might be some discouragement around people who want to get in and want to build a relationship, but expect that it's going to take a quick, it's going to happen quickly. It's going to take a short amount of time. And then when you say something like 6 months, I can imagine for many people in the room, it might have been a penny dropping of, okay, so if I'm not getting through in the first couple of weeks or even months, it's okay. I need to persevere and keep trying to build that relationship. And as
Yeah,
you say, not from a salesy approach, but from a how can I add value? And I
yeah,
think part of that is them finding out what is valuable to you,
yeah,
not to what do they perceive to be valuable to you from their perspective.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit more, please, around what is valuable to you. And I know you're speaking from your
Yeah.
perspective. We know it's not everyone in the whole world, but really interested to know
Mine.
what.
Yeah. Look, I think it may sound a little bit almost fluffy, but consideration, I think, is often
Mhm.
key for me. And I'll maybe give you a couple, just maybe two examples of, for me,
Yeah.
what did definitely was epic fail, did not work. One example was I had just taken on the role as group head of APSA, and about 5 days into the role, because I updated my LinkedIn profile, so notifications went out, and everyone's kind of wishing you, giving, congratulating, which is fantastic. So I get an email from an agency, congratulating me on the role, and I thought it started out really well, very awesome, appreciated the message. And then, like, into the second paragraph, it's like, I'd really like to touch base with you. Here are a couple of dates and times of maybe when will suit you. Now, for me, that was vastly inconsiderate, because it's a transition into a new role. If you understand the complexity of the role and the organization, you're going to understand that I'm probably going to not be available over the next couple of weeks at least, as I'm transition and as I get to understand the environment a little bit better. So I wasn't quite appreciative of it, although I kind of sat back and I thought, okay, well, if I had to be in the other person's shoes, how would I respond? So I think it was a very diplomatic response, and I will, make the time, because I think it's important. And again, Jane, we spoke about this. I think relationships are key. It's just not always when it suits both, if that makes sense, or suits the one and not the other. So I think
Exactly.
that's where the patience comes in, because we will eventually meet, that's no doubt. I will make the time, that's no doubt. If anyone has worked with me before, you would know that is true. It just requires a little bit of patience as we kind of navigate through. And I think the same would apply in most corporate organizations. If I chat to some of my colleagues and some of my peers, life has become manic. You
Yeah.
in meetings 24/7, 8, 9
Yeah.
hours a day in back-to-back meetings. And the unfortunate case is that, and we do need to reflect, and this is maybe a question I pose for all of us, to really sit back and think, how do we change and shift this? And I am looking for the answers, definitely, because it's not sustainable. So how do we get to do the more important stuff by building relationships, to build relations, make the time to do so, because you are in meetings, you're solving for things, but you're actually not spending, in my opinion, the time that we need to spend in building and nurturing those relationships, so that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And I suppose I'm not only speaking when it comes to kind of the agency, corporate, or partner. I'm speaking about all partners, irrespective of what service you're offering. I think irrespective of what you're offering, you are still an extension of us as an organization. And I think that's another important point to note, is that, not to be seen as separate, but to seen as one organization. And then, sorry, going back to the second example that I'd like to use is, again, kind of gotten in the first month multiple emails from the same agency. And, I was sitting one evening responding to emails, and I got to respond to say sincere apologies. I won't have time to kind of meet with you over the next 2 weeks, but our PSL opens or will be reissued over the next couple of weeks. We'll put you on our list and get back to you. And I got 2 emails post that saying, I'd really like to have a 15-minute face-to-face with you. And I responded by saying, I actually did respond to you to apologize, to say I cannot see you, but we will build it into our process when we reissue our PSL. So again, just be respectful of the communication, I think, is also important. And then I think the other thing is, when I speak about being a partner, it's really both ways. And I'll give you maybe a third example, but really we're not doing a very great job either as corporate organizations. So let's flip it on the other side. Also experienced recently where one of our agencies were not happy with our process, and rightfully so. So, but again, it's about having the conversation. How can we do better in our processes? There's a lot of red tape, especially in a corporate organization, more than you could even imagine. So how do we help to build a more streamlined process, and still maintain professionalism, empathy, consideration from our perspective as well? And I must be honest, I quite appreciated the feedback we got here, because it's so important. How do we build that into our engagement and our professionalism? Because I think a few years ago, the relationship was vastly different. And I mean, I was on the other side of the fence, where the corporate client was deemed to be God type of thing. You do whatever it takes to make your client happy. And on the opposite side, I'm the servant that will make sure I make your life easier. And I really would like to move away from that kind of slave, relationship, what I'm trying to say. And really, I go back to, it's a partnership. It's really a two-way street. You are supporting me with external insight. You probably get to know and understand the market a little bit better than what I do, because I'm looking at it from a one lens perspective. You may have multiple lenses, and sharing those insights, I think, is absolutely key. Jane, probably maybe the last thing I'm going to just comment on from the snippet perspective, and I know we, in all this passion, I'm moving from A to B to C.
No, love it. Keep going.
I really also just want to add, like 10 years ago, when I was in an agency environment, we did things a certain way. We all operated in a certain way. We account managed, we sourced, we did what we needed to do. We built relationships, etc. Coming into a corporate environment later, I'm still seeing a lot of the same ways of work. And in certain instances, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's great. But I keep thinking in the back of my mind, if we're being forced to change and pivot and evolve and transform as a corporate organization, how are agencies starting to think about their business model and how they shift and do things differently? And I think that's probably the other thing that's going to stand out for me is, how are you doing things differently to the 200 other agencies that are, and I promise you, I literally get 10 to 20. I was telling you, Jane, a week. So just trying to keep up, just to respond to them has been a challenge for me, but that's how insanely. So what the other thing that's going to stand out for me is, how are you doing things differently? But how are you doing things differently in such a way that you're actually supporting the needs of our business? So if you understand an organization the size of ABSA going through transformation, what our pain points are and what our challenges are, then meet us halfway and show us how you can support us better in light of that. I'll pause there again, Jane.
No, I love what you're saying, Ilhaam, and I think as you're speaking, I can imagine a lot of people, and I'm thinking you could be one of those dream clients, somebody who wants to create an equal partnership, instead of a top-down. I see somebody in the comments has said slave ship. We don't want to feel like a slave ship. So absolutely, you don't want that. And I think that's amazing that you value that, and the fact that you value people being considerate to you, I think, is reflected in how you are quite clearly considerate of other people. And there is a lot of pressure on you. There are a lot of people coming up to you. I remember telling you that when ABSA was my client back in the day, when I had an agency, I remember my client even then saying 2 PM, she'd already got 20, 25 calls from different recruitment consultancies. So you are targeted just because of where you work. And you're saying you're looking for differences in them. It's not just the corporate, the client who has to transform. So do you have
Yeah.
any examples of, and you don't have to mention names, but examples of either situations or pieces of service that you've experienced where you thought, that's different, that impresses me, that agency's approach, or that difference in the way that they offer their service? Is there anything that jumps to mind?
Yeah, look, I won't use specific examples as such, but I
Yeah.
will say what impressed me the most, I think more recently, probably like a year ago, is when the candidate that you present fully represents what we need. Not only from a skill perspective, right? So if you are able to speak to that individual's strengths from this person would really do well in your environment, but not only speaking about all the good stuff, actually speaking about the not so great stuff either. That impresses me. It's because we're dealing with humans. There's no way that you're going to find this unicorn that's 100% matches what you're looking for. So again, comes back to that honest conversation to say, well, these are strengths A, B, and C. However, they lack in this area, which I know may be a problem in your environment, but I'm thinking, given the strength, like really having a conversation around this is why this person would do well, either a good fit for the role or potential fit into that role. And not from a perspective of, I want you to take this candidate because I want a placement fee, but really from a perspective of, could this work in your environment or could it not? You know, if they lack in certain areas, could this work if they hold strengths in other areas? And that impressed me huge, because it was a completely different conversation, where you're coming from, please, you need to have a look at this candidate because this candidate is so fantastic and this is all the skills that you have and you must interview them. Like very different conversation, because again, the energy comes from, I need to place this person and I need to place them now, because I'm earning com.
Yeah, and I think you keep using that word conversation, Ilham, which is so key to describing what's important to you, that partnership of conversation, of putting minds together to solve the problem, the two of you together on the same side, rather than I am selling to you and I'm going to push it onto you because I have to make that placement.
Absolutely. Like it's my very approach to work as well is that's where I think collaboration is really built up from, is it not? Is conversation and not really a dictatorship. So I think that's absolutely key. And again, I mean, I can go through all the other things that's annoying to most people: sending unsolicited CVs, not engaging with the candidate themselves, not understanding that candidate themselves. You have that very often. And again, that's a absolute big no for me. Again, like understanding your candidate and what would work and what wouldn't work is absolutely key, because effectively you're the middleman between the corporate organization and that individual. And you probably know them 10 times better than what we do from a CV perspective, because you've had conversations, you understand what makes them tick, you understand what's their strengths, their weaknesses, development areas, etc. So again, build a relationship with the candidates as well in order to understand whether or not they're a good fit for APSO or a business unit or cluster within our environment.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Ilham. And I want to ask you something, because since you talk about the consideration and the conversation and understanding everybody's busy. And a couple of things have come to mind. One is, sometimes I find recruitment consultants assume that if you're pushing back or not responding, it's because you don't want to. And sometimes they push harder. There's not an assumption of good intent that, oh, she would want to get back to me and she's just busy. And another is that when I've spoken to some consultants over the past week, they've been quite surprised that there might be someone out there who says, please don't call me first. I would actually prefer to have an email in my busy inbox, and we've been talking about busy inboxes, requesting me for time. So please tell us more about that preference on your side and what's behind that.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit of funny. I'm finding it very funny right now. So I work for APSA. I'm trying to swap one of my insurances over to APSA Insurance. I'm trying to get a quote from them.
Yeah.
And so I go through the channels to get so, and they keep trying to phone me, not setting up a time. And it's just, if I tell you, like, I mean, back to backs most days from 7:30 or 8 o'clock until 5, it literally is like, it's not even an exaggeration. So I've been missing their calls all the time. And obviously, when you try phoning back, it goes to this automated message. So eventually, I had to send an email and say, can we rather schedule time? And that's where it becomes why I prefer the email first, is because when you schedule time, then I know I've got it in my calendar. My time is your time, and I can dedicate my time to you. But if you're going to try phoning, chances are I'm only going to be able to return your call after 5:30, as an example. I often don't want to, because I don't want to infringe on family times. I think, okay, when I find a gap tomorrow. So it just becomes this whole ripple, big domino effect of me not returning your call, because
Yes.
then get manic. And I am, again, hoping that it subsides. I think it's new to the role, it's new to the environment, just getting to understand and the ways of work and where everything is and all of that sort of thing. So I'm hoping it's not a forever thing, but that's the reality of where I am right now. So when you do send me an email, at least I've got better control as to, when we set that time for. And again, I can do you more justice as well, because then you've got my 30 minutes attention, as opposed to I've got another call coming through on Teams. I can't take this call right now, or whatever the case may be. So I just find it, and I find it a little bit more respectful. I mean, we know often when we're dealing with very senior candidates or stakeholders, you're not just going to phone them. You're going to actually say, hi, I'd like to schedule a meeting, because you actually don't know what they're busy with at the time that you free. So rather just let us try and find time that would suit us both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking, as I'm hearing you're saying 30 minutes, I'm thinking you're willing to give 30 minutes of your very precious time, especially now, and maybe it lets up, we don't know. But you're also saying you're getting hundreds of emails, hundreds of recruitment consultants wanting to contact you. So what is going to be the difference in the message that you receive that would make you say, yes, I want to give 30 minutes to that person, and no, I'm not going to give 30 minutes to that person? So what's in that message that, impresses you?
So I have to be honest, I think previously, when the volumes weren't as high, I actually gave 30 minutes to everyone that emailed me. Now, I have to be honest, I find it a little bit more challenging because of the amount of people, and also because I'm not actively involved in recruitment from a COE perspective. So our recruiting teams within the different business units would do their own recruiting. So we can have the conversation, but I'm not the person you should be wooing. It should be talent acquisition lead and the team within business that's actually going to give you, like, we very seldom would manage recruitment unless it's specific roles, as you can imagine. So then it becomes I'll meet with you because I need to understand what it is that you do, if there's any overlaps, and then pass that message on to the recruiting teams. But if you look at the communication now and what stands out for me, again, not the sales pitch. Like, I don't want to see something where you've just changed dear Ilhaam, and I know dear Ilhaam was dear Jane last week, was dear Theo last week. And, it's really something that's a little bit more personable. And I know, I mean, Vanessa would be super proud of me as well, because she really says the same thing about emails as well. So I know Van is very proud of me as I say that. But yes, hyper personalize. And again, do not be shy to use ChatGPT to do so. Like, as long as it's personable, and it shows that you took the time to get to know me a little bit, at least, or the environment. I think it makes all the difference. And then if you can look, I think you get generous, and that's fine. But we're living in an era where critical skills is a real thing. if you can showcase your understanding from an apps or banking perspective, what those critical skills are and how you can support in managing or breaching that gap and supporting us from a people talent perspective, then that's always a bonus. I think we also, like a lot of agencies, it may be a little bit more challenging is because everyone has become tech specialists. So therein lies the other kind of challenge as well, is everyone's doing talent. Everyone has become specialists in talent. So what's going to really, really set you apart? And that's probably a little bit more difficult to answer, actually, Jane. So I would like to think that at some point, each person will have an opportunity. Showcase what they're able to do. And hopefully that's through our pre-sale process.
Yeah, I love your heart and your approach, Ilhaam, that you want to give everyone the time. And again, I see that respect and that consideration coming through from your side, which is so attractive.
Thank you.
It's something I'm thinking as I'm hearing it, because I love that you say, I want someone to not just want to make a placement, but really get to know me as a person. And what I have seen sometimes is people feel a little bit like, where's the line between getting to know you as a person and having a personal approach, and having a too personal approach where it's actually, what?
Yeah.
Please don't be so personal. We don't really know each other.
No.
Yeah, help us understand what your definition of a personal approach is, someone really trying to get to know you without being too personal.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Jane, actually. So no, there's definitely a line, I think, in any relationship. But I think for me, it's when I say personal, I think just like on the surface level, personal, like my role being a lot more, being professional, maintaining that professionalism, and not necessarily asking me. I mean, at some point when you're having a conversation, you'll end up asking, like, do you have kids? Do you have a family? How you manage? Because kind of it warps and morphs into work-life balance, and that's okay. That's a good conversation. But I think, like, what are you going to cook for dinner tonight? I think, like, no, that's not okay. But questions like that is a big no-no. I think that's becoming a little bit more personal. But questions like, do you have kids? Like, everyone loves talking about their families and their life, and and just on surface level, it's great because we actually all trying to solve for the same thing, which is some degree of work-life balance. We all have very similar challenges in that regard, and so I often find, myself included, is like, what is this, like, the snippets that you can give me that would help me, because it's certain things that I struggle with. So that's okay, and that for me is kind of having a professional / personal relationship where you're not just seeing the role or the organization, but you're actually seeing the person behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Ilhaam.
You're welcome.
And you talked about something else you said earlier that I thought would be interesting to understand a little bit more. As you said that you sometimes say to recruiters, and maybe it's not just external, maybe it's internal people who are also trying to build those valuable stakeholder partnerships. And you hear them saying, but we do try, we are trying. So for people who want to try and maybe feel like, well, we have tried or we are trying, what would you suggest? What are kind of top tips for people who want to impress you? Or you mentioned even your preferred supplier list.
Yeah.
What would be a good, effective trying for people like that?
Yeah, also, again, a good question, and I'll probably answer it from two different hats.
Perfect.
So the one is, if we, as part of our process, that the reissuing thereof, is we really want to use it as an opportunity to build relationships, and not even relationships, connection first. So it really give it somehow in the process, and we're still embedding it, so I can't give you all of the detail yet, but the thought process is that there's an opportunity for the agencies to meet the teams and the teams to meet the agencies. So, because that's one of the biggest kind of challenges that I hear, is that we don't actually know who to speak to. We don't know who the teams are. The teams don't know what we do. And so how do we get that opportunity? And again, very often it's not like I can't speak on behalf of somebody else. So they may have a different view. They may want to say, well, I don't want to speak to agencies at all, which is a little bit of a problem. But often you find when you build that connection and that you have that first engagement, it changes perception. So I would say as part of that process, use it as an opportunity to connect. That's the first thing. And then from the kind of internal perspective is, again, it is a very difficult and tricky thing to do because it's a relationship currency. And so if you don't get that opportunity to start connecting and building those relationships, you're almost on a back foot, right? And so like, how do you go about engaging? And I probably I can give advice, but I don't have the answer because I think it's a personal thing. Like I would approach it in a certain way and another recruiter may approach it in a different way. So I don't really want to speak on their behalf. But again, I would use relationships to get to understand that environment, to get to understand who's in that environment that I could potentially speak to, where when I do draft an email, I already have context as to, I understand that you are going through these challenges at the moment. I want to say that this is potentially how we can help solve for that problem. And that's probably just a high level answer, because I think at the end of the day, you're always going to ask yourself, what is the problem I'm solving for? Right? And then the recruiter is asking the question, and should I be asking a partner to help me support, solve for that outcome or that problem? And so in approaching it from the opposite direction, you should be answering the very question we are asking ourselves, is like, how do we solve this problem? And you come in with an answer is effectively what we're asking to.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for giving, advice or tips, or your approach at least, to the internal partners, not just the external. And something that I feel like I can't help but ask you this, please, because it comes up in so many workshops, whether I'm training external recruiters or internal. There's often a concern around, as the recruiter, I understand that I need to have more information in order to be able to assist you. And if I don't have that information, I'm probably going to find the wrong person.
Yeah.
And so I normally have the view that a recruiter would need to be able to explain to their stakeholder or their client why they need that information and how they are saving them time and money by getting that for them.
Yeah.
But there are clients, be they internal or external, who just feel like, I'm not going to give you that time. I don't understand why I should give it to you. I can't give it to you. I'm too busy. And then the recruiter, again, be they external or internal, withdraws and either works on the role or doesn't work on the role. But they find it so difficult sometimes to push back in a relationship building way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please, your insights or your thoughts on that.
You're bringing back so many bad memories, Jane. No, I'm just kidding. No, look, again, I would first and foremost say very, very openly, like, if there's any recruiter that is not understanding the environment or not having that briefing conversation or understanding what the role is about or in the environment, whether you're internal or external, please resign. You do not belong in the environment. So I would feel like it actually shocks me if you don't. It really does, because then you a process pusher, if I can call it that. Then you're following a process and you are doing a keyword search in your CV, and if it doesn't match, you're regretting. There's no value add in you as a recruiter, whether you're internal or external. So there's no bias there. So I would strongly suggest that they're in the wrong field and in the wrong role, and especially if they don't want to. On the other side, to the hiring manager or the stakeholder, I would say to them, do you seriously want to fill your role? Because give me 30 minutes now and I'll save you 4 months of agony, or don't give me 30 minutes and we'll take 6 months to eventually figure out through trial and error what you're looking for. So you have to be able to find that balance. But there's certain things that's an absolute must do unless you have the conversation, again, conversation, Jane, and unless that conversation brings you the understanding of what you're looking for, you actually can't do your job properly. And it's different, I think, for any recruiter that may have been in the same environment for, let's say, 5 to 10 years. You've gotten to know the environment, you know your stakeholder well enough that you can actually tell them what would work in the environment. Those relationships gets built over time.
And again, it's time and it's relationships and it's conversations and it's understanding. And that I hear you say over and over, as if you can't emphasize it enough. And it's such key points. Thanks, Ilhaam.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jane.
So any other further tips before I open it up for questions or comments? Anything else that comes to mind that you think?
I think hopefully the questions will kind of spark more insights. Yes. So let's hand it over to the team for questions.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you, Ilhaam. And again, just thank you so much for sharing your time.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's a delight. It's a privilege.
I should probably say also thank you for accepting me as I am, because that's important to me as well. So thank you, Jane.
No, you are wonderful as you are. There is no other way.
Thanks, Jane.